Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight. I'm Wang Guan, sitting in for Tian Wei. On the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Tian Wei sat down with Dr. Piot, the director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who is also the co-discoverer of the Ebola virus. He has been working in the field of global pandemic studies. He shared the biggest lessons learned so far in staving off the deadliest epidemics.
Since there is a coronavirus outbreak going on in China, tell me, how do you see the public health crisis we have been witnessing for the past 20 years? Let's just say SARS, H1N1, H7N9, Ebola, of course. How do you read this evolution?
The world has always had epidemics. This with outbreaks will be there. And why is that so? Because these are viruses that are so-called zoonoses. So what is a zoonosis? These are viruses that infect animals, but often animals are kind of in happy cohabitation with the virus. But when they jump from the animal, let's say it could be a chicken, it could be a bat, to humans, then you get these epidemics. And when you look at, for example, Ebola, the reservoir is a bat. When you have MERS in the Middle East, it's camels. You have with SARS, civet cats. Influenza is usually birds. And also because of, population growth, dense populations, and huge mobility. That's very different. Let's not forget, 100 years ago, we had the largest epidemic of modern times, the so-called Spanish flu. Killed more people than World War I, 50 to 100 million. But then we were only 1.7 million people on this planet. Now we're well over 7 billion, and millions of people travel. And so that makes the world much more vulnerable, and that's why we will see more and more of these outbreaks.
Is it a myth that some people talk about every 100 years there's likely to be an epidemic that's like going to wipe out a huge proportion of the population? Or the virus worked in a way and mutate in a way, grow in a way that there is some kinds of academic basis when that statement is being made?
Yeah, throughout history, there have been big epidemics that wiped out millions. Spanish flu 100 years ago. HIV, the AIDS epidemic, let's not forget, has killed about 35 million people. That's not a detail, and it continues. And then we had the influenza epidemics. And that's because these viruses, they mutate. They change their genetic makeup, their coat, so we are not protected to them. That's why we need vaccination against influenza every year, because the virus is changing a little bit. But when that influenza virus changes completely, and we have no protection against it, then we will have the big one. That's what I'm most concerned about.
You were instrumental in contributing to the making of the vaccines for Ebola. Peter, can you tell me about how, when a health crisis like Ebola broke out, experts like you can work with one another? In what fashion, on what timetable? What about the division of labor? How to bring up the efficiency? These are all very crucial for us for information of the past cases.
You cannot control an epidemic, or you cannot develop these new vaccines without very strong collaboration. And take the Ebola vaccine. The good news is now we have a vaccine that's licensed, a vaccine by Merck. There's another one by J&J that is in, under consideration by the regulatory bodies. But this is the result of work of like 10 to 15 years. And the problem was that there was no commercial incentive. You're not going to make big money with this.
Yeah.
And so that's why, first of all, I pay tribute to the companies who have invested, but that's why also the public sector has to intervene, and academia. And so the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, we worked with these companies in West Africa to test out the vaccine, because you need to prove that it works.
So tell me, what exactly is this process about making vaccines, on a general term? So when you have already genetic data of a virus, from there to a vaccine comes along, what are some of the usual steps? How should we understand that?
Making a vaccine starts with having the virus, the isolate, and also for certain techniques, the sequence, the genetic makeup. So without that, you cannot make a vaccine.
That's step one.
Number one. Secondly, then you need to purify, and you need to see that this is safe, because for vaccines, we need absolute safety. And that is first tested in animals, animal models. It's purified. And then you have what we call phase 1 trial. That means that the vaccine, the candidate, the experimental vaccine, will be given to maybe 30 to 50 people to see what kind of dose do we have to give, 1 injection, 5 injections, etc.
Right.
That's phase 2. Then we go to phase 2 at larger scale, and ultimately it has to be tested in an epidemic and see whether the people who receive the vaccine are protected as compared to those who don't get it. And very important that it's safe, that there are no major side effects. That takes years and years and years. And in the case of epidemics, we can only test it out in times of epidemics.
Yeah, but for the Ebola vaccine, from the time it broke out to the vaccine come into being and could be available in the market, there seemed to be a much shorter period of time than what you have just illustrated.
Yeah, the luck we had with Ebola is that a lot of the basic research, the initial work had been done, and that took years. But once the testing in people happened, and that was in 2014, 15, it took still 4 years to license it.
Yeah.
Still a lot of time, but I think today we can move faster, because there are also political issues,
yes.
The bureaucratic issues and all that. But I'm optimistic that there are new techniques.
Yeah.
For example, a new coronavirus, it could be that with the sequence we have, that we can already start testing new vaccines in people in about 4 months, something like that.
Even if the virus mutate and develops, with the original genetic data of the virus, for example, the coronavirus, you can still come up with the right kinds of vaccines.
Yeah, but that's a very good question, because we can make then the vaccine against the virus that's isolated, but there's no guarantee that it will protect against some mutations.
Yes.
That's why a vaccine, we don't have one, but against another coronavirus like SARS or MERS, they may not protect against other coronavirus, but maybe they can. But take influenza. For influenza, we need a vaccination every single year,
right,
because the virus mutates a little bit.
And changed.
And changes.
And you can anticipate to a certain extent the direction of change.
Yes, to a certain extent, but not completely.
Not completely. Another thing, Peter, for SARS, we have already got vaccines, but it's still controversial.
Yeah, we're still in the phase where it has to be tested in alongside, and we could. The luck is also we have not had a big SARS epidemic since 2003.
That's right.
And we need that in a sense to test to prove that a vaccine works. You need people who are infected or when there's an epidemic. So, but there are animal models, and so we're close.
Will the so far outcome of the vaccine be able to in any way help provide a foundation for the development vaccine with the current coronavirus?
We're very lucky that there's been a lot of work done with other coronaviruses for vaccines, SARS and MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. So we can learn from that. We don't have to go through the same way from scratch.
Yeah.
And that is really good news.
Another point, which is very important, super spreader. Of course, this is not necessarily related to a vaccine story, but this is very crucial in terms of how an epidemic develops and how people should be protected as a result. Peter, what can you help us to understand what makes a super spreader and how to define a moment when a super spreader is identified and with what evidence that can be done?
Every epidemic spreads often with leaps, It's not like that it's the same pace everywhere.
No.
But you can have an amplifier or super spreader. It can be someone who dies, and at the funeral, a very famous person, and everybody comes and touches the body and so on, and that has given rise to really new outbreaks, super spreader. We have it in typhoid,
Yeah.
but there it's different. There it's more of a biological phenomenon. Some people spread out. This is, you know, through their stool,
Yeah.
the bacteria, the typhoid, in a big way. And I think it's also bring people where people come together, because when it is a respiratory transmission, it's where people come together, that you can have super spreaders, someone who has a higher viral load, so where the virus production in the body is high,
Right.
cough is more, and you're sitting all in the same waiting room in a hospital,
And
for
there we
example,
go.
and I cough and cough and cough,
Right.
and yes, and I infect so many people.
What do you consider as some of the most important layers of contingency plan, reaction plan, treatment plan, regarding what we learned from the past 20 years, starting from SARS?
What we've learned of all these epidemics is, the first thing is that very important to have a system that you know as soon as possible. So time is very precious. The title of my memoir is No Time to Lose. And in an epidemic, you know, when you can control it early on, you prevent not only a few cases, but every single subsequent contagion. So time is very of the utmost importance, and having the system, good laboratories and all that, that's one thing. So then transparency, because you cannot hide anything. We've seen it with SARS, but today this is much, much better transparency in the community. So communication about it, explaining to people, but you also have to be very important measures depending on the mode of transmission. With a new virus, we don't know all this.
Yeah.
But when we know, if it's respiratory, you know, you have to isolate people. You know, wash your hands is usually extremely important.
Yeah.
It can be closing down the market. So all these measures have to be put in place. But for me, the key is then communication, explanation.
To what extent should the public authority and the health officials or those experts working in the channel communicate to the public? Now, you want to communicate to the public the facts, but you also know that the facts could be changing as we talk. Meanwhile, the facts being considered as facts today could not be facts sometimes tomorrow, because things have changed and your reflection about what's going on have also changed as analysis. So how do you see that, Peter? To what extent health authorities should hold certain information? To what extent the information should be shared?
I think, frankly, you cannot communicate enough. And
that's crucial.
That's crucial. And I think, you know, in today's world, with social media, with, you know, people doing all this communication, it's very hard to hide anything. So better to be upfront of it.
But you don't want people to panic either.
You don't want people to panic, but so it's not only issuing a press release and reading some boring statement, but also work with the social media and with people in the community who are trusted and engage with them. At the moment, there are so many unknowns that it's very hard to predict where we will go. But I think it's safe to say we cannot take the risk of not acting. And so that we should assume that this is going to become a very big epidemic. And therefore, we need to act early. And if we act now, we may prevent this wider epidemic. And transparency, communication about it, and working together, not only within the country, but also internationally. Because there are cases everywhere. And exchanging that information is going to be absolutely crucial.
Peter, because there are so many people that really want to contribute to the cause, to help people to bring health back. But with divided efforts, it will not be as concerted efforts efficiently. So how to bring all the efforts efficiently and concerted, that's a question.
There are several levels. When it comes to developing new vaccines, we now have CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, and 5 years ago I chaired the meeting here at the World Economic Forum that brought together pharmaceutical companies and ministers of health, ministers of development, the Gates Foundation, welcomed her all together, and we decided, let's work together. And now, for the first time, we have that mechanism, and it works. And they are also now investing in developing vaccine for the new coronavirus. Now, but when it comes to controlling an epidemic on the ground, there also we need international collaboration. Of course, it's the local authorities, the local health department, it's the local businesses that have to rise to the occasion.
Right.
But with people traveling all over, transparency, exchange of information, communication is as important as medical knowledge.
And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like more, you can visit our website. Just type World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out your YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. From me, Wang Guan, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks so much for watching, and tune in again next time for more insights from across China and around the world.